Welcome back to Country Dance Spotlight. My name is Rob Ironside. I'm the president for the Country Pride Dance Club and one of the instructors for the club. And again, here with me today is Stuart Old. Hey, Stuart, how you doing?
Doing great. For people who don't know, I serve as grants director. I learn dancing and do whatever else I can.
And he's being modest because he's helped me out with most of these podcasts. I think he's only missed one. And it's really good to have bounce ideas and some of his experience on some of these topics. So today's topic is who's leading and following. This is definitely a good one, and I would hope that some of the people who take our lessons, prior to taking our lessons, listen to this podcast because it might burst some bubbles, but at the same time, it helps lay some ground rules as far as helping you become better dancers. And if you've had any bad habits or any fears in the past of dancing, this will help you look better out on the dance floor.
Mhm.
So, yeah, just dive right into it. We're going to talk about the roles of the leaders and the followers. And one example I really like to use here is when it comes to leading and following and doing all the fancy turns and all the craziness that we teach people is partnership and who's leading and who's following. The best example of seeing a good example of this is watch a couple who's a senior couple, maybe in their 70s or 80s, and they're out there on the dance floor. They're not doing any turns, but they just look really good together. They're dancing as one. They're moving together on the floor, and they're just enjoying themselves, and they look great. That's called partnership, you know. And so that's what you want to do is be able to learn how to move as a unit, not two individuals. One obviously knows what he's doing or she knows what she's doing, the other one doesn't. So then it doesn't look good. You want to look as good as a couple. And yeah, and that's the whole idea of learning that role. Stuart, I know we're as we go through this, we're going to talk about people we have danced with that didn't understand this. Why don't you start?
Right. So I guess first of all, starting out, I've mostly been a lead when I've danced, and it's a lot to keep in mind. I've been miserable at it many times. Like I've done it poorly many times. And then at the same time, when you're a novice, you run into people who follows who have like built up a lot of bad habits, and that hits you right away. And so it presents a lot of challenges as far as like communicating with the other person, because you can't be rude, you don't want to be overbearing, but you got to deal with that. You got to deal with the fact that there's partners who are listening or want to communicate, and then there's partners who don't want to communicate.
Yep, and that's very true. And I mean, we really do try to pass on as much information to make dancing a positive experience for everybody. And I know some women get totally flustered with their partners when they can't have their partner learn as fast as they want them to. And so sometimes women think that they're really helping their guy by leading, and that nothing could be further from the truth. Women that think they're helping their guy, really all they're doing is making the guy be more unsure. They second guess themselves, and yeah, men have a pretty fragile ego. If all things are being everybody's being honest here when it comes to doing this, and so if you tell them they're doing it wrong 3 or 4 times, they're probably going to quit trying. And I've seen that happen, unfortunately. And so if and the bad part is if if guys don't do anything and they leave it up to the women to lead themselves, they may be doing it right or they may be doing it wrong, but most likely too they're leading late. So Stuart, I know, again, you alluded to this, that you've probably danced with some women like that.
Well, it depends like the context of where you meet your dance partner. So at a lesson, they are there to learn, and so your partner is usually like they're in the same sort of learning mindset.
Yeah.
And then out socially, if you ask a complete stranger to dance, you don't know like what they like to do, but they do. So you get out there, and then they might be initiating turns, they might be driving backwards, right? Because lots of these dances, you're going around the dance floor, and they're like driving backwards where they want to go, and it can be pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
to mention, if you like you were saying before, like if you're a learner and you're trying to think, okay, now I want to do this, and if your partner has already started something that they want to do, that's kind of the opposite of what you were talking about with like the partnership, right?
Yep.
You're two different people doing two different dances at once.
Yeah. Or one doesn't know the moves that the other person's trying to do, and yeah,
Exactly.
this doesn't work. So I mean, leading and following is it's one of the biggest issues when it comes to us teaching couples to dance. um, and believe it or not, especially with couples that have been together for a while and they've really settled into the roles they have as either husband, wife, boyfriend, and girlfriend. And we hear this quite often. Well, we've been doing it this way for years. And you don't want to contradict them and make it sound bad, but if they've got those habits that you just mentioned, yeah, sometimes they have to undo that. And sometimes it means the guys have to step up to the plate a little here, and
Yep.
they have to take charge and make mistakes and learn. And the women have to be a little patient with that. So they have to let the guys make mistakes again and again until they get it right.
Yeah, it can be. I was actually in that position before going to like before I came up here to this club where I was in a relationship which things weren't going so well, and then you that comes onto the dance floor with you,
Yes, it
which is
does.
weird. You wouldn't think it would happen that way, but it totally does.
Yes, it does. And then sometimes what happens on the floor, you take it home too, and that's even worse. So we're going to get into the things that actually help here for women and men. And this was it, without this being a dance class, some of these topics that we're going to touch on here are going to help if you know this going into a class. So for the women in particular, the women need to maintain a good frame, good posture, so that they have so that they're able to be led, or they can feel a lead and they're not going to collapse. A lot of times women will be so light that if the guys try to move them, their hands move but their bodies won't. And
Right.
so what we talk about is that ladies need to maintain a good frame, so that if the guys move their frame, their body moves. Now that may sound really basic and simple, but that is really important, and it makes such a big difference in all the dances that we talk about. um, we talk about having different pounds of pressure on your hands depending upon the dance. If it's two step,
Mm.
you're in a closed dance position and you have your hand on the lady's back. And we talk about, okay, we feel what 1 pound is or 2 pounds is of pressure. There should always be some kind of connection there, either between 1 to 2 pounds of pressure. To have nothing is just leaving the ladies to be unsure about what the guys want as far as what their lead is going to be.
Yeah, I find like that one of the problems with what we're calling frame here is that if you're a beginner, you start with it, but as soon as you start trying to think about what your move is going to be or whatever, you forget about that. And then you collapse and then you're like a wet noodle.
Yeah,
And
we
it's hard
call
for
it
your
wet
partner
noodle.
to follow that.
Yeah, yeah. And if you think about it, as the ladies are concerned, if they're trying to second guess and feel what the guys are trying to do and they're not got good frame, yeah. So the ladies need to maintain good frame, and so they don't collapse. Now here's the thing: the men need to initiate the movement prior to they need to initiate the movement prior to the dance move itself. So for example, we're just going to say an outside turn. um, well, you can't initiate it or give the signal light to say I'm going to do this turn when she's supposed to do it. You need to do it the beat before that. So the way that we describe this is it's like putting on your signal light. Do something
Right.
different as a prep or a lead prior to doing the turn, so the ladies can recognize that that is a lead. And so you don't want to trick the ladies. You want to make sure that they can understand that something's coming up, something different is about to happen. And again, this applies to all dances. Now, some guys will have too much. You see the pump jack stuff, and some guys call that style. But if it's too much, then it's just noise, because the ladies go, oh, I'm supposed to turn. No, I'm not. What am I supposed to do? Because the guy's all over the place. It doesn't mean you need to dance like a stiff board, but at the same time, you need to be able to communicate to the lady, hey, yes, I'm going to turn. No, I'm not. She needs to be clear about exactly what you're doing. So, next one, myths for men. The myth is that they don't want to be too hard, that they might hurt the lady. Well, that is, I guess, legitimate. There might be some guys that are too, stiff as a board, but you want to be firm and flexible to give direction. So it is a real myth that that you don't want to be too hard with the women. They're not going to break. um,
Right.
but at the same time, that 1 to 2 pounds of pressure or connection, as we call it, you need to have that in order to be able to lead the ladies.
Yeah, it's consistency, right?
Yes, exactly. Myths for women, that I can follow any leader if he leads. Women usually are too soft, noodle arms, just like we talked about, and they don't maintain their own balance and they lean on their leaders. They don't maintain their own balance.
Oh,
So
really?
this I've seen many times where the women just say, "Hey, if if I've got a good guy, he can lead me through anything." Well, yes and no. Um, but if you're a good follower, you're easier to lead too, because
Hmm.
I make a bad analogy, and I say sometimes it's like driving a Ferrari. My wife is a Ferrari, and there's some beginner dancers that don't know, and I call them Mack trucks. They're a little harder to lead. So
Right.
be a little bit more firm, give more direction with that. So yeah, um, guys definitely need to be able to give that lead, and the women need to maintain their own balance. They don't want to lean on the guy, so that the guys have to push them off and then say, okay, now go do something. And I'm sure you've danced with women that have been both good and bad, Stuart.
I think it was interesting dancing with. There's some women who have had like ballet experience, so they're very much. So this actually plays right to that. They're very much on their own balance. They're not leaning back or against you or anything. And it's definitely night and day from someone who just has less experience, right? It's not anything else than that. They just haven't had that sort of training to be like really self-confident in what they're doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Now it is the guy's job to control a woman's center. So as far as giving her a lead, shifting her body with your body, that kind of thing, if you move her center of mass to be able to do a turn, she should be able to feel that, and you feel it as well. But if you don't do anything and she can't feel the lead, then it's going to be harder for her to initiate a turn. Yeah, all of that. So we're going to talk about center of balance here just briefly. And this is kind of stuff we talk about in classes. But when we talk about your center of balance, and this is kind of hard sitting down showing you, but just to explain a concept here, is the center of balance, we have this in sports as well, where you have to have your center over top of your toes to stay balanced, the ball of your foot, for example.
Right.
In dances that have what we call our upper center, our dancers, well, let me back that up, sorry. We have a kind of a upper center, lower center, or middle center, and lower center. So kind of up toward our chest, middle, and then our belly button. Um, Certain dances, you kind of lead from the lower part of your body, and those would be
Mm-hmm.
dances like waltz, nightclub, and triple two, where you kind of go out slowly from your lower center. Um, Other dances like West Coast swing and two step, we make the analogy that you should hook a string up to your center, like right where your solar plex is, and pretend somebody's pulling you along from your center with a string. That's the other way to think about it. And so that those ones are from your center in the middle. Your upper is dances like polka, cha-cha, and East Coast swing, where you kind of lean into them a little bit more. So with polka, you're going 1 and 2, three. So your upper body would move before um, your lower center type of thing. So when we're doing those in class, you have a better idea. My point to explaining that is that women will see that as well, because women will watch your head and your center of mass. So if they see you start to shift, even here on the camera in this podcast, if you watch me real close and I'm not moving, but then I commit my bottom or I commit my top, I mean, you would pick that up subconsciously as a lead, right? And you can see
Mhm.
that happening. So that's what women will watch for, and what they need to watch for as far as the lead is concerned. Um, I've got an example of that. Do you want to share any stories about that?
Well, you go ahead, and
Okay.
yeah.
So I've danced with my wife lots, and she knows all of my little idiosyncrasies. But I've also danced with some master dancers and some, some high level dancers. And if you twitch the wrong way, they move because they think that was a lead because you've committed your body, but then you're not sure. So you second guess yourself. Well, they already took that as a lead and they're gone. So it's like having those high performance sports cars where all you got to do is just, and that's it, that's gone. Whereas the other ones, you have to kind of go, I'm moving. And then they finally figure it out.
I'm certainly not at that level, that's for sure. But that's how subtle it gets if you do it for years and years, right?
Yeah, it is because I don't have to, give them a real, you know, loud, dramatic lead. It can be very subtle and they'll pick it up. So yeah, women watch their head and the chest of the guys to watch, and their eyes too, because the
Hmm.
guys might look in a certain direction before they go in that direction, and that helps. Now, the other part to this is men need to learn how to move and commit their body to a movement, not just use their arms. Because sometimes the guys they'll say, "Okay, well, turn. I'm turning it with my arm." Well, I tell the guys, especially, it's as much your body as you move your body as you start to turn her as it is your arm.
Hmm.
So she's going to feel that, and she knows that if you commit your body, you don't want to trick her. Again, I say play poker with your partner, move your body and then don't do anything, because then now you're sending her a mixed signal. So yeah, it is kind of, an art form at the same time. Um, so one of the few last things we're going to talk about here is types of leads. Now, you've probably heard some of these, Stuart, and you might not have heard them all. Similar lead versus contra lead. Now, similar would be if I'm going to do an outside turn. So I'm going to go in that direction toward the camera that way. So I start to move the lady in that direction and then I initiate the lead in the same direction. So that's called a similar lead. And this would apply to any dance. It is two-step, waltz, swing, doesn't matter. Or could be a contra lead where I do the opposite, kind of wind her up and then spin. So it's
Okay.
kind of like winding up and then undoing it. The tough part with some of the contra leads is some women will interpret that as a lead to go that direction, especially if they're in sweetheart position, for example. If I prep them outside to be able to turn them in, they might take that prep to the outside as that's the direction they're supposed to turn. So when the guys are first doing this, and maybe you've experienced that, have you?
Well, I just think that, like broadly speaking, the more experience you have as a lead, the less likely those miscues are to happen because the better you get at saying, this is what we're doing now, or this is where we're going, the less room there is for, someone's obviously wondering what you're thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the next one talk about here is that was similar lead is a physical, where the body will either move forward, backward, or to the side, or it stays in place. So obviously, if I'm moving to the side, if you call it matching and mirroring, if I move to the side, you would hope and expect your partner to move with you. If you move backwards, same thing. Or if you're stationary, that's also a lead. It's a lead to do nothing or stay in
Mm.
that spot. So that's a physical lead. The body language we've kind of talked about a little bit already here, but any kind of body language, it can be your upper body as far as your centers are concerned that we talked about. It could be a body roll, if I do that kind of thing.
Right.
It could be even just eye contact. Whereas if I'm looking at my partner and then I look to the side and then she notices I'm looking someplace else, well, that could be a lead because now she knows I'm going to do something. Another type of lead is visual, um, an action easily noticed by the follower. Obviously, those can be any of the ones that we've talked about. And lastly, is a verbal lead. Well,
Mm.
we do this, but not so much with partners, but a verbal lead, cueing and calling of one dance routine done in cadence with that dance rhythm prior to a movement. We do this with the team all the time. It's
Right.
calling out, okay, yeah, we're going to do this move, and it's followed by this move. So you actually have to call out the move prior to doing it. You can't call. It's kind of like saying, okay, turn there. Well, you've already passed the turn. You have to say, we're going to turn up here. So you call out the move before you get to it so that you know that that's the one coming up.
Right.
So those are all the different kinds. Now, as people are listening to this podcast, they might be starting to think, well, this is insane. There's so much to think about and remember.
Hmm.
But you know what? It does get easier. It does become natural after a while.
Yeah, I think you pick up, depending on the dance, you pick up the basics and then you just work on those basics, and it makes and like night and day difference after a couple of weeks.
Yeah, it really
And
does.
if you do it for a few months, even more so.
Yeah,
So yeah, it sounds like a lot, but that's also because we're talking about in a couple minutes like a whole lot of different material, right?
yeah. And some of this stuff all applies to all dances that we do. One of these last concepts I'm going to talk about, and I know all our students, we drive them crazy with this, is cup and pin. Cup and pin with
Mm.
your hand connection. It's really easy if you've got your partner in closed dance position. You've got your hand on her back, and you've got her hand here. You've got a hold of her. Well, she can feel that, and it's pretty clear. Where so many dances, and even in two step when you're doing turns, all you've got is fingertips where you're touching or holding on to each other. She has to pay attention to your body. She has to feel that tension in your hands. And so having what we call cup and pin, where the guys or the ladies make a cup with their hand like a C, and the guys just take their two fingers in and either going to put it on the top of that cup or the bottom of that cup, or if the ladies have their hands like this resting on the guy's hands in front. So instead of trying to grab a hold of each other's hands or getting all kind of, you know um, tangled up with each other or unsure, lose connection,
Hmm.
those little hints to people that have been dancing together for a long time can make a world of difference by just having that one connection with their hand, staying connected with their partner through a turn, through moves that they're trying to do, instead of fumbling trying to figure out who's going to
Hmm.
hold. Yeah, it makes a big difference.
It does make a big difference. I hesitate to call that a small thing because it's kind of a big thing, but small things can make a big difference.
And
Like for
this is
instance, me reminding myself to take smaller steps. Like,
you're the only one that does that. I don't know why, but people go into dance mode and they take big steps that they normally wouldn't take walking down the
I
street.
yeah.
I know.
If it's like the like somehow if the music's faster, like I think that I'm rushing towards somewhere, like I gotta run. No, just like keeping in mind like the shorter steps make everything easier.
Yes. It's easier for women when they do turns, and it's also
Hmm.
easier for guys if they have to, cover a space in a certain length of time. If you take a big step, that takes longer than it does to take a small step. So sometimes if people take big steps, they're off beat, and so
Yes.
then they're behind the beat and they're off time. So I think, to wrap things up here today, if both people have the dance knowledge, the men are more confident and they know they're going to make their ladies look good out there, and the women feel confident too, that if they let their men lead, that they are going to look good out there on the dance floor. And now this kind of comes back to full circle from what we talked about when we first started the podcast. You don't have to be 80 years old to look good as a couple out on the dance floor. But the reason those couples look good on the dance floor as 80-year-olds is because they've been dancing together for 50 years. They know how each other move. Whereas if you know some of these things that we've talked about in this podcast, you'll move well as a unit, as a partnership on the dance floor, and you'll look good dancing together.
After 30 seconds, you'll be able to do that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll just with some of these tips. Anyway, Stuart, any last comments for today?
Well, I just think like it depends what kind of experience they're looking for when they're dancing, and I know that like traditionally speaking, most of the people came up to take two step are couples, and so in general it's often the man leading and the woman following. But I also know like especially at Country Pride, there's a lot of really good women leads, so anyone can learn either side of it, and either way they have a lot of roles and responsibilities and like technique. And it
Yes.
doesn't matter if you're following or leading. There's not a free ride. You could go back and forth about it. I
Yeah.
still think like the lead probably has to do their homework, or else it's going to be tough. But yeah,
You
you
know
can
what?
switch it up.
To be a good partnership, women has to be a good follow. And I've danced with good follows and bad follows. And following is not easy because they have to dance with a lot of different guys that, and they have to interpret all that. And leading isn't easy either. So I think everybody just needs to cut themselves some slack if they both have the knowledge, and they're going to be more confident out there on the floor together.
Yeah, like you said, actually, if you understand that you have to let the other person make mistakes, or you have to let yourself make mistakes too, because otherwise you don't get to the next level.
Yeah.
If you're always worried about screwing up and you're like in lesson two,
Yeah.
yeah, be generous to your dance partner for sure.
Absolutely. Okay, well, Stuart, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. I want to thank you for joining me. And yeah, I think we'll see everybody on the next podcast. So thank you.
See you then.